When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply. When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Hurt Tell. Okay, this is going to be fun. We're going to talk a little higher ed and the highs and lows of Appalachia, West Virginia specifically. We're going to talk to our good friend Bob Hutton. He has a lot of letters after his name, so that's Dr. Bob to you, teaches things like Appalachian Studies, Glenville. I can't say university, man. I still say college. How long did it take you to adjust to that? Because it's always been Glenville State College all my life.
You know what? It didn't take me long to adjust to it either, because they did it just about 4 months after I got there.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't really hard for me to adjust. In fact, I like to tell people that's why they got university status, because, finally I showed up. Not true, though.
I see the prestige thing. I got deep ties there. Both my parents went there for their undergrad. My daughter goes there. Great school. Let's just start right there, because Glenville's a good example. It was actually the West Virginia Teacher College, if you go back into history long enough. Small school, 1,600-ish admission, something like that. Mm-hmm. Small school, but hasn't really had highs and lows. It just kind of maintains and has done very well.
As I understand it, there was a real low around 2006, but I've never gotten the full story on that.
West Virginia, for all its other upheavals and things, the college and university system has been pretty steady there. We've had some examples of it. I went to college West Virginia, which turned into Mountain State University, which turned into a debacle and got shut down, and they eventually moved West Virginia Tech into those facilities. We've had some bad spots. We have this Alderson Broaddus situation going on now where they're decredited, and the flagship university, WVU, has got funded. They're not going to close down or anything, but they've definitely got some issues to deal with. What's the history of higher ed in West Virginia just generally? Because although there's been some of these it's been kind of pretty consistently steady, hasn't it?
Yeah, there's been certain key moments. If you look at the history of Glenville, for instance, as a sort of as what do you want, kind of a synecdoche of higher ed in West Virginia in general, there's certain key decades, like, for instance, when were we founded? 1872, right in the middle of Reconstruction. I mean, what's driving that? Well, the fact that there's suddenly federal money for education. And all of a sudden there's demand for teachers, and a lot of people got together in the community here in Gilmer County and said, we need a teachers college because we need teachers. So they petitioned the state for that, and they got it. And then so, there's sort of a steady march from that point on. The first few decades, the school had principals rather than presidents, because the distinction between a high school and normal school was, really fuzzy. And then you have the Depression. And then because of the Depression and because of the New Deal in reaction to it, there's a tremendous amount of money pouring into education. The building that I'm in right now was built by the Works Progress Administration, WPA, and very important part of the New Deal. So, and then I guess the next real high point would have been the 60s when the baby boomers started going to college. And again, you had a tremendous amount of federal money coming into some sometimes otherwise very impoverished states, and a president that two presidents actually that were very interested in West Virginia. That being Kennedy and Johnson, right? And not to mention, it was the early salad days of a guy named Senator Byrd, Robert Byrd, right? And he was always pretty good about getting that federal money pouring into West Virginia in one way or another. So you could, a lot of people think it's a combination of pluck and luck, but quite frankly, it's a matter of demand size planning. Where there's some sort of demand, you throw the money there, or you try to get the money there. And some of the more successful moments have been when the federal government really wanted to prime the pump of education. We're not in one of those moments right now.
Right. Bob Hutton joining us. That actually gets us to exactly why we're having some of the problems we're having now, not just in higher education, but secondary. Look, you talked about the 60s. That's when my mom and dad went to school because they got federal teaching grants because there was a massive teacher shortage.
Yeah.
Both of them very poor. My dad was first in his family to go to college. My mom was the first woman in her family to go to college. And they went to Glenville on those federal grants. And that's how they got education in my generation. And here I am because of that kind of decision making. That's also part of the problem, though, because that generation is all retired now. That massive core of the baby boom teachers, we really haven't recovered fully from that on one hand. Then you had COVID on top of that. Those two events coming within about a 10 to 15 year period of each other, that's part of the bedrock of what's going on now. Then you talk about the funding and you have a triangle of bad for education, higher, secondary, primary, whatever you want to call it. That's a bad combination for anybody to have to deal with.
It is, and also in the next decade or so, we're going to have a real fall off in the number of students because in the alts, people stopped having quite as many children, right? So a lot of the politicians who don't like education anyway are going to use that as an excuse to twist the wash rag and take even more funding out of what we're getting than what we have already. So it's sort of a critical mass of a lot of different problems going on, like you say.
One of those problems, look, there's no way to extricate funding from education. There's just no way to do it. We also know that funding alone does not fix or make education better. So this is kind of the paradox that everybody's got to deal with here. To me, education's like any other problem, though. If you have a higher education institution, whether it's the size of a Glenville or the size of a WVU or a Harvard or a community college or whatever, that always is going to go to the leadership of that school. Look, you and me are sitting here talking about it. Everybody knows what the demographics look like. They know the trends. They know that we just taught a whole online set of kids that they can go to school online. That's going to have an after effect. They know these problems are coming. A lot of this really does come down to the leadership of the individual schools and how they manage that funding, not just the funding, right?
Yeah, and then of course that's the problem we see going on up in Morgantown. There's been, I used to teach in Tennessee, where when around the time I left, the General Assembly and the governor's office were being really hands-on when it came to higher education. Usually not to a great result. But in West Virginia, you notice Governor Justice, and I think a lot of prior governors, they typically allow schools to do as they will. There's a certain amount of independence for your state school. And that has not worked to WVU's advantage under Gee, I don't think, especially not in the last year or so.
Yeah, Bob Hutton joining us. Give us a little comparison here, because we can get a little insular in West Virginia. I'll admit that. I think we can all kind of look in the mirror on that one. Sometimes we make things worse than they are. Sometimes we make things a lot better than they are. Use something like a Tennessee, a neighboring state, another state that has, a lot of mountains. They got more metro areas, but culturally got some similarities. Just give me a comparison how West Virginia is or has been doing with higher ed compared to somewhere like a Tennessee, a neighboring state.
I think West Virginia and Tennessee are pretty comparable when it comes to higher education. For one thing, you have, correct me if I'm wrong, but WVU is both the state university and the land grants. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, Tennessee does a similar thing, unlike a lot of states where you got a UVA versus Virginia Tech or an Auburn versus Alabama situation. With both Tennessee and West Virginia, the state university is also the land grant institution, and that leads to a kind of an interesting identity crisis within any university. in Tennessee, they had this most of the time I was there, they had this worked out so that there was the University of Tennessee system, which was about 4 or 5 campuses. And then separate from that, you had the Board of Regents schools, which was all the state regionals plus all the community colleges under one particular board. And they've kind of fixed that since then. Here in West Virginia, though, of course, each university, your Marshall, your Glenville, your WVU, all your state schools, they're pretty autonomous. And so you don't have this one system president. I think even WVU Tech has a separate president from WVU, correct?
Yes.
So, there's a certain kind of autonomy that you see in West Virginia that's, I suppose, based on the Virginia model, but it's very different than what we experienced in Tennessee.
Yeah, Bob Hutton joining us. How much we've all said it because it's just a buzzword now. Higher education improves lives. Higher education improves the economy. You go to college, you better your life. Well, there's some nuance to that. What is the effect when you're just looking at Appalachian history, West Virginia a little more specifically? Has it really had the effect we think it has? Has it had more of an effect or less an effect? We say the buzzwords, but we also see, the demographic bleed in the state. We also see the economic troubles. Is there a way that we're not perceiving it? Is it really helping or hurting, or is it just kind of this neutral thing for those that make advantage of it? It's like everything else. It's what you make of it.
I think the students that I've talked to about this, I've had a handful of students just in the 2 years I've been here who come here for a semester and they'll say, this really isn't for me. And I'll say, well, if that's how you feel, then don't go to college if you're not feeling it, right? It's like your football coach used to tell you, you got to want it. And I don't remember really running into that acquiescence 10, 12 years ago teaching at other schools. And I think people are starting to realize that something that, it's been abundantly obvious for 40 years now, a bachelor's degree is not a golden ticket. Now, for those who it becomes a golden ticket, oftentimes that's going to be a plane ticket or a U-Haul ticket, and they're going to leave the state. So if you increase education's availability enough, and if enough people partake in it, if they don't find the opportunities right here at home, they're going to move to another state. And so I do think that one of the ironies of making higher education so much more available and affordable in West Virginia, and I do think it's more affordable here than in a lot of other states, is the fact that it has probably contributed to migration out of the state. People were graduating with bachelor's degrees and finding opportunities in North Carolina or Virginia that they weren't finding here. And that's a problem.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Save big this summer with great deals, all in the Baker's app.
Get select varieties of Powerade or Body Armor Super Drinks for 79 cents each with a digital coupon. Then get juicy red, green, or black seedless grapes for $1.49 a pound, all with your card.
Shop these deals at your local Baker's, less than 10 miles away. Or tap the screen now to download the Baker's app to save big today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Yeah, Bob Hutton joining us. Is there any way that the higher education system in West Virginia could be a part of the solution to that trend? Now, obviously, if you give people skill sets and they can't utilize them, they go elsewhere. We know that too. Are we utilizing our college towns? Are we utilizing the universities and the colleges that we do have? Is there a way, do you think, that we're not using what we already have to maybe try to retain those people in a better way, do you think?
I think there's a pretty good example going on between places like Morgantown and Fairmont, where they'll set up these very active sort of technological districts. Of course, this involves a lot of science, technology, STEM type learning that I know nothing about, but it seems to create jobs. And of course, you're going to see it. You end up seeing it up in Mon County more than you are in many other parts of the state. Southern West Virginia, a little bit south of where you're from, they seem to be kind of very gradually getting away from fossil fuels and kind of embracing sort of a tourism economy. Well, tourism economies generally don't require a tremendous number of college graduates to run them. It usually requires a lot of people who barely got out of high school to work service economy jobs, and it's sort of the problem that Western North Carolina has right now. You can't just expect the university to improve the lot of the state. It creates the opportunity, but it doesn't really create that many jobs other than the ones that are, of course, on the university. The county I live in, I mean, obviously the university is by far the largest employer, except maybe for the natural gas company. And I think we employ more people than it.
Yeah, I promise you on Golly season, when you're on the Golly River in September and it's up by about 6 feet, you don't want an academic guiding the raft. I assure you.
You want some guy who probably went to college for 1 year and he gives you the whole story about how, summer teeth or whatever. And you probably heard that saying. And those are skills that are not generally learned in a college, although sometimes they are. I mean, I learned how to canoe at college. But very few people are going to go to college for canoeing.
Yeah, that's true. This is why I think, as much as I hated it look, my dad was born in Montgomery. My grandfather worked at Alloy for his whole career. I hated what it did to Montgomery, but this is why I think moving tech to Beckley was a very important thing for that region, because now you will get those science-based kids and you will get some of that. And some, it may only be a percentage of them, but it takes a few of them to kind of start hanging around in the area. I think that's an important thing, and I think watching it going forward, maybe I'm hoping a little too much here. I do think long-term, it'll be very gradual. You're not going to have like a Microsoft thing pop up or anything like that. But over the next 10, 15, 20 years, I do think that could make a very big difference in that community, especially when you look at kind of where it is. You got the New River Gorge stuff now. It's kind of the gateway, the next biggest large city. You could see where that moving a technical college, and that was a very well-respected engineering school long before they moved it. So I'm not just being a homer here.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff, I think it really does matter to a rural area that's really hurting in a lot of ways.
I mean, look, Beckley has gotten big enough that it was pretty much screaming to have a college. I mean, there was already Appalachia Bible College, but to have it's a school, it's a town the size of the city, really, sizable enough to support a good sized university. And I think the move was probably good for Beckley in some ways. And look, here's the thing about Montgomery. Look where Montgomery is. It's halfway between Fayetteville and Charleston, correct? It's not that far from Beckley either. It's within a corridor that's going to, even if West Virginia might have a net loss of population in the next 10 years, that area of the state is going to have a net gain.
Yeah.
And Montgomery is not going to completely lose its entire reason for its existence. It's not going to go back to a state of somewhere like 2 or 3 of the counties just north of where I live that don't have any colleges or anything like that.
Yeah.
They're in a good, geographically, they're in a pretty good spot, and it's probably going to be a tourism-based economy. So in the short run, I feel really bad for them. But in the long run, I think they should probably, realize that they may have bunions, but other people don't have feet.
That's a great way to put it. Bob Hutton joining us. Yeah, I my true freshman year, I went to College of West Virginia, which is the same buildings now that West Virginia Tech. Logan Hall, we were the first people living in Logan Hall, the dormitory, took the plastic off everything. I'll tell you some stories about it, but I don't know the statutes of limitations in Raleigh County, so we'll skip that. When you're talking to young people, because Glenville does get people from outside of West Virginia, there is culture shock. I mean, let's be fair. Even by West Virginia standards, you go to Glenville and just look up that hill and you're like, what? Why did we put a college here? The culture shock is one thing. What do they think once they've adapted and kind of settled in a little bit? What's that outside perception? Because you see it because you get these college students coming in. It's a little bit of a unique viewpoint. And then what do they think about West Virginia and Appalachia as they go along?
I've had more African-American students in one semester here than I did in the entire 12 years I was at the University of Tennessee.
Wow.
Now, I'm not sure what that says about UT, but at Glenville we have, like you say, a really diverse mix because we recruit so much out of state when it comes to athletics and also outside the United States. I've had students who've come to play golf here from Canada, Great Britain, Paraguay, South Korea, you name it. Not just golf. That's one of our more popular sports. And I'm sure for the students, it's an amazing culture shock. But a university, one of the key elements that a university needs is diversity and voices from beyond just the immediate area around where that university is. And that's just as true for Oxford University in England as it is for NYU, as it is for Glenville. And whatever culture shock that takes place, I think is ultimately a net positive for the students, for the administration, and I can certainly attest it is for me as an educator. I've really appreciated the diversity we have here. I'm not saying the UT didn't have it. It just never really filtered into my history classes there.
Yeah, Bob Hutton. I think diversity, and people kind of recoil at that word in certain areas. But if you look at the history of West Virginia, you're an Appalachian history person. You know this. The 2 or 3 biggest migrations into West Virginian history were very diverse migration movements in a lot of ways. You had a lot of Eastern Europeans. You had folks coming out of the South that were African American and others. It's always been a place where people who were looking for something better or had nowhere else to go, they would filter in. And those people are always going to be diverse because human struggle is a universal concept, right?
Yeah.
I don't see any reason why we can't do that again. We've done it before in the past. Folks just need to get over that diversity part because that's exactly who you need to be because that's who's going to want to come.
And I don't understand the blowback against the very concept of diversity. I don't either. I don't understand it.
No.
I mean, a lot of people would say, well, it's racism, Bob. And I say, well, no, maybe it is, but I don't understand it. I thought I understood racism. I thought I understood bigotry. I don't understand the general blowback against the very concept of diversity among an otherwise, kind of coat and tie type crowd here in the 21st century. I mean, what's your problem? Seriously, what is their problem? And that's what I think. Even in our last days, when we have maybe 36 students left, and we're basically teaching in a cave, and I may be trying to teach history when it's no longer even a major or whatever. One of the roles of the school is going to be asking portions of the United States, what is your problem with what we're trying to do? Why have you been trying to stop us? Why do you persecute us? Because why are you threatened by education? Now I don't run into this here. I've yet to run into that sort of attitude here in Glenville. But in the more than 10 years that I'm just saying in my 20-some years of teaching, I've run into it like crazy.
Yeah, it's people get scared and people don't like different and people don't like change. And I get it because I left when I was about 20 years old. I went in the military. I've been around the world a couple of times. I come home, people look at me like I'm different, even though I'm from there. I mean, it's a thing. I go to Walmart, people, because my accent's gotten soft too, because been gone too long. But after about the third day, the hills and hollers and yonders come back real fast. But I'll go to Walmart and people they'll look at me because they're not sure who I am. It's a cultural thing, but it's also a little bit of intellectual laziness. But I think a lot of it is just a lack of perspective. And that's something I try to take up in my writing and other things, because I've got to be outside of it, and I'm proud to come from there, and I work back in there and do things now. And I'm like, look, there's this big world out here that'll really, really like us. You just got to let them like us and try to approach it that way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, we're talking in some pretty broad strokes here, but that's very much true.
Well, I mean, you're an educator. You got to educate to the lowest level. And culturally, there's just some folks that are at the lowest level of understanding there's this real big world out there that will love this place as much as we love it if you just give them a chance to. But there's a couple of things you got to stop doing because they're non-starters for some other folks. It's just that simple. I mean, it's a broad brush thing, but it's also, we're talking about tourism dollars. We're talking about kids into our colleges. We're talking about careers and people wanting to come in and set up businesses. That's stuff that these folks consider when they go to spend their discretionary income.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Bob Hutton, finishing up on an education question, because that's what we're supposed to be talking about, and we got off on that. What's something, because you're an academic, as just the audience and me, when we're watching the headlines and people are going to debate the student loan stuff and all that, what are you looking for in news headlines in higher education over the next year or so? It's an election year, so people are going to be talking about it, things like that. What's something that piques your interest? What are you keeping an eye out for? Is it schools in trouble? Is it the enrollment? Everybody talks about enrollment. Is it funding? What are you watching for in the headlines?
I'm not sure what I'll be looking for in the next year. Well, in the next 5 years, I do have a couple grim predictions. Some not so grim, but our private 4-year institutions are in real trouble. Look at the ones that have gone under just since I've been in West Virginia. We've had two. One of them just this past week. Aldous Brodus, is that how you pronounce it?
Aldous and Broadus is how I said it, but those Philippine people do it different, I think.
Okay, well, if that's Aldous Broadus, that almost rhymes. Anyway. And of course, Ohio Valley.
Yeah.
We lost, I believe, in the fall, right after the fall semester of 2021. Both of them, I'm assuming, to be victims of COVID for the most part. That's a trend that began before COVID. I remember a handful of denominational schools down in Tennessee going under, Hiawassee, which was a Methodist school. The availability of affordable education via community colleges, where you can get your associate's degree and then hop in and get your next 2 years at a university. That's going to make things really hard for our 4-year denominational schools. So I wish them well. They're who we play ball with in the Mountain East Conference. We need them for competition, if nothing else. But I'm really concerned about a lot of these schools. Now, I've seen a handful of them try to build themselves up into universities, after being a college for 150 years. Taking on new roles, a lot of the time in medical, in the medical realm, sometimes by adding on a business school, things similar to what we're doing right here at Glenville. And sometimes that works for them, sometimes not so much. In the next 4 or 5 years, I see online education becoming way more prevalent. You were just saying how we have a handful of students, the age of my second oldest nephew, who've barely even experienced terrestrial schools, who are kind of used to online education. And a lot of them are going to sort of expect it to come 10 years from now. And that's definitely on the horizon. How the politicians are going to react to that, I'm not so sure. Probably by throwing austerity at us like usual. And there's, and of course, in the you talked about we were talking earlier about the upcoming election next year. The general politicization of education. When I was growing up, I hated school when I was in 4th grade, but you never would have heard a politician of any political stripe talking smack about education. They might have argued over the finer points of, well, we need to remove the asbestos at this one school or what have you. But you never would have seen anybody go after education as a concept, like a Rottweiler. And that's right. That's very much what we have going on right now. I think the argument, just the existential question of education, is going to become a more and more politicized topic. And as much as you and I may be sort of dreading the election cycle of 2024, I think we're probably going to be hearing a lot about education for that reason. So I'm anticipating a lot. And I'm anticipating a lot of headaches. I'm stocking up on my aspirin, but it's still the best job in the world.
Yeah, my father, who taught Braxton County High School, they were the original staff of the school. He said, "Where else are you going to work 9 months out of the year, get weekends and summers off, make a good living, and you can live in West Virginia?" And that's how he always put it, and do something that really, really matters. And,
yeah. Low key, having summers off is worth $10,000.
No argument. No argument at all. Bob Hutton, thrilled to have you. We'll definitely have you back. We could talk about this stuff all day. Let folks know where they can keep up with you, what you got going on, how they can follow you till we get you back on Heard Tell, probably after the semester, because you get right busy here in about 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, especially next week. But you can always follow me on Twitter or whatever it's called now at ampersand. Here comes Dr. Bob. I have some other outlets for social media, but I think that's the one where I'm most active, and I think Andrew can attest to that.
It's the most fun one, at least.
I'm working on a book on the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency. That's more of a Southern West Virginia subject, but it's something I've been working on for quite some time. And it's with our various debates about law enforcement these days. I think potentially a very important topic. That's basically all I have to plug at the moment.
Yeah. Of course, the Baldwin Felts Shot Set Hatfield. Last week was the anniversary. Just had it here a couple days ago as we're sitting and recording this. I was watching a movie with my family, and there was it was a Gilded Age type film, and he's like, go get the detectives, and I just recoiled, and they're like, wow, oh no, that's a bad word where I come from, and I had to tell them the whole Baldwin Felts thing, and Drew Mountain had to walk them through the whole thing. So we'll definitely have you on to talk about that. Those Bob Hutton, thank you so much, Dr. Bob. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks for having me. I'll see you.
Yes, sir.
All the music on Heard Tell is provided under a Creative Content license from monstercat.com.
Somos la máquina. Menards is your electrical headquarters. We carry all the tools and testers you need for any electrical job. Stack up your toolbox with Southwire electrical products today. Right now, save big money on Southwire electrical tools, testers, cable ties, wire, and cable. Shop our huge selection in store at Menards. Ranked #1 in customer satisfaction among home improvement retailers according to J.D. Power. For more information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Save big money at Menards.
America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At Grand Canyon University, we believe in equal opportunity, and the American dream starts with purpose. To serve others in ways that promote human flourishing and create a ripple effect of transformation for generations to come. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
Folks, if you've listened to the Heard Tell program, you've heard our friend Gabriella Hoffman, but you need to make sure you're checking out her podcast, District of Conservation. It's a podcast exploring the nuances of true conservation efforts from D.C. and beyond. From topic discussions to exclusive interviews with conservation and energy newsmakers, Gabriella keeps listeners appraised of the latest news stories while elevating important voices. Listen to the District of Conservation on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are played.
Religion is at the intersection of our 21st century life, even if we don't express a faith. At a time when it seems that religion isn't as prevalent as it once was, it still leaves its mark everywhere. As a pastor, I know that religion isn't something I just do on a Sunday, but it's found in every nook and cranny of my life. Sexuality, politics, social media, the economy, war, nationalism, all have some kind of religious angle to them. And as a communicator, I want to find the stories that can help people understand this part of our society that is so important to so many. Hi, I'm Dennis Sanders, and I'm the host of Church and Main. Church and Main is a podcast about the journey of faith and where it intersects with modern life. I look at faith with a journalist's eye, asking the who, where, what, why, and how religion affects some of the major issues of the day. Join me as we journey together. You can listen to Church and Main podcasts at the website churchandmain.org or on your favorite podcast app. I look forward to seeing you.